Hey, what's going on, everybody? So, I was scrolling through Facebook and everything, and I came across this post. But this post led me to a video, but it also led me back to my video. And when we talk about mound building, we have to be fair. We have to look at it from all perspectives because not all cultures are mound builders. And in fact, some cultures did come upon the mounds. Now, when we read this post, I want to read this particular part here where it says, let's see, where it says, while everyone looking at the mound building culture of the Southeast United States agrees that the culture was greatly influenced and a daughter culture of the Mesoamerica. Now, that's false because they also say that the mound building culture begins too early to be associated with either Mayan or Aztec cultures, but rather it's contemporary with the earlier Olmec culture. Now this is wrong, and I want to show you something. Now, watching this video is going to tell you about Yupaha, right? And they're going to tell you that, hey, this is like Egypt, this is Mayan, but you have to remember a lot of these people think that America is Egypt. So I want you to just hear this little clip and I'm gonna take you to my video. Listen to this real quick. Watch this.
Who believes that an ancient archaeological site near Georgia's highest mountain. Historians and archaeologists have been debating for centuries about what caused the collapse of the Maya culture and where the people went afterwards. There have been various explanations, but perhaps the most controversial is that the ancient Mayans fled Central America after their societies collapsed and made it all the way to the mountains of North Georgia. This is the contention of researcher Richard Thornton, who believes that an ancient archaeological site near Georgia's highest mountain is possibly the site of the fabled Mayan city of Yupaha, which Spanish.
Now, while we're looking at Yupaha, right, or how they say Yupaha, right, what we have to remember or what we have to first understand is that when the Mayans left, they left at a specific time period. There were already a people in the Southeast, yet not too many people know about this culture because they focus on the Mississippi and the Mayans. So what we're going to do is we're going to go look at the different mounds around this town, and we're going to date them, and then we're going to date when the Mayans left. We're also going to date when the Olmec came. This is something that we really have to talk about as being a real Yupa or Yupaha or Yapaha or Toshuya or the real Wale. You get me? And it's not to say that the others aren't real, but what it's to say is that those that have the original story aren't going to give credit to the Mayans. Now, this is my video, and what I want you all to do is pay attention to what they say. See, people want to give credit to the Southeast to other people, but we've been doing this before they got here. So they're going to explain to you why the Indians of the time don't know where the mounds come from. Is because something special. Maybe they had not. Watch this. Listen. Just listen to this.
Exotic to be indigenous to what people thought of as the New World. When confronted with the question of who built these earthen structures, later inhabitants of North America didn't accept that these finds were the work of ancestral Indians. The finds indicated a more sophisticated culture had once thrived there. Not only did the current lifestyle of the Indians seem unrelated, but the Indians themselves, when asked who was responsible for the mounds, didn't have an answer. Anxious for a solution, Americans at the time came up with other explanations.
Now, we're going to pause it here. We're going to think about this, right? The reason the people didn't have the answer is because they did not build it. Now, Americans, as they say, came up with other excuses, other reasons, or other people that could have built this at this time. And he's going to tell you who got the credit for this because they didn't want to consider it to be indigenous. Now, you have to tell your story because when they tell the story, they don't got it all. Nobody know everything, but you're going to find out why people give credit and who they give it to. And this is where the spookism come from. I've been did a video on this.
the time came up with other explanations.
The earliest interpretations of the people who built the mounds was that they couldn't have been Native Americans. They had to have been constructed by someone coming in from somewhere else, whether they were lost Welsh tribes or lost children of Israel or Maya from South America or something like that. But in fact, they do appear to be, and there's no evidence to suggest that they're not, purely indigenous. The people who were living here at the time constructed them.
Even the lost continent of Atlantis was included in these lost race theories. The ideas presented not only seemed exciting and magical, but were probably promoted to increase the value of the artifacts being sold as curios by those plundering the mounds for profit.
Right? The issue that I'm having is that when you check the dates, you have mounds that date back to 3545 BC, right? 2800 BC, right? 2200, 1200 BC. When you look at the LSU mound, this 11,000 years ago. So how could we attribute mound building to the Olmec, right? Look at this. How could we attribute mound building 12,000 years ago? That people were inhabiting this particular land. This is Florida. Shakuhachi, 50,000 years ago. How could we accredit mound building to the Olmec when, look at this, come on, man. Look at this time. Even if you wanted to push it back, you can't push it back 50,000 years. Even if you wanted to put the Maya, right? The Maya, right? How could we give, right? The Maya. Let me look for the date for the Maya, right? Right? Let's look at this. Okay, we're going to look at this, okay? And then we're going to go 1500 and you compare that to this. This mound, this mound, this mound, this mound. All of these mounds are older than, right? But people want to play games.
Lost
People want to play games.
Or
Listen.
Maya from South America or something like that. But in
Listen,
fact,
they want to
do
play
appear
games.
to
People want to play games, and this is why studying my work is very important. People want to play games. Listen.
Yupaha, which Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto failed to find in 1540. Some of Thornton's conclusions about the Mayan connection to Georgia are based on oral history. He also believed
we're not denying that the Mayans came to Georgia. I'm actually did plenty videos on the Maya migration, the Muskogee, the Miccosukee, and the Muskogee migration. But where people are not going to do, they're not going to give credit to our things to them, which were in place 4,000 years before their migration. But no one is doing the work. No one is doing the work. No one is doing the work. Let's go over the migration. We were considered a republic in the northern part of Mexico, and they had a lot of warriors. These were people that were ready to fight. But even though they fought and assisted Montezuma, Montezuma still lost and died. But on the next page, it says that after the death of Montezuma and many other chiefs, the Muskogees, considerably weakened by this terrible war, which they were no longer in a condition to maintain, determined to abandon a country which offered them, in exchange for their past happiness, only for the most terrible slavery, right? So they had to leave. They're like, you know what? Look, if we stay here, then we're going to be enslaved. We're going to become slaves of the Spanish. Now it says that the Muskogees, when they crossed over, they're giving us a time period. We know that the Cherokee are a later people, and the Cochita are still coming to the east. But they're coming to the east after they lost the war when they were fighting with Montezuma. So who are these particular people? Matter of fact, the best question is, who was here in the east before the Muskogee Creeks got to the east and built their great mound to signify their settlement in the southeast? Now, dealing with the book. So You can find this in text. And it basically says Muskogee speaking immigrants began drifting into the southeast during the late Mississippian period, perhaps around AD 1200, incorporating native populations into their ranks. Now, if you study any part of our story, we speak on the beginning of ceremony when you have the unification between the East and the West. This is what we know blew up the Mississippian culture. Not giving too much detail on the reason why. Now, I'm going to take you to two different people that's going to explain this same migration, and it should be enough to convince people to stop giving credit to the in the Southeast to people that we already predate.
That shows another tie between the two regions. Sometime after the Maya civilization subsided, the Miccosukee's ancestors were conquered by a powerful nation to the north. This was probably the Mexica, which is normally called the Aztecs. A band of the Shoki fled northward along the Great White Path, which was a major road in eastern Mexico along the Gulf of Mexico, picking up bands from other peoples oppressed by the Mexica. They eventually reached the Chattahoochee River, then followed it to its source, where they created a new homeland. The timing places the Shoki arriving in northeast Georgia probably around 1250, 1300, 1350 AD. We're really not sure. There are no radiocarbon dates for the sites we're studying. That means they probably had nothing to do with the construction of the stone buildings and petroglyphs we're finding in the area, but that is not a definite fact. Radiocarbon dates for the sites we're studying. That means they probably had nothing to do with the construction of the stone buildings and petroglyphs we're finding in the area, but that is not a definite fact. It could very well be that the Shoki originated in that area, went to Mexico, and then came back. It's a question that has not been answered.
Now, when we allow our Yamasee cousins to tell their story, a lot of them say that they left the north, went down to the south, and came back up. And we can say that, like he says, we don't know if these the Mayans had nothing to do with them because they predate them, and or these might come from a people that went south and then came back north, which is very possible, right? What I would like to highlight and continue highlighting is that there were a people that didn't leave. There were people that stayed. There were people, and it could be possible a majority of a people that actually stayed here and was are products and descendants of the people that built these mounds. Now the Mormons, they tried to accredit this to the Jews, and we heard the guy say earlier that people often want to give credit to our things to other people, but as Guale, as Yupaha, right? We're gonna defend this, and we're gonna let people know, like, hey, bro, you can't give our things to people that we predate. So if you studying this and you are who you are, we gonna know. We're gonna know. We're gonna know.